The letter arrived on a Tuesday morning, slipped through the brass slot of Beatrice Holloway's Bloomsbury flat with the mundane certainty of junk mail. She almost tossed it aside. Another solicitation, another reminder of a world that continued spinning despite her recent stillness. But the weight of the envelope stopped her hand. Quality paper, cream-coloured and textured beneath her fingertips, sealed with actual wax. In an age of emails and instant messages, someone had taken the time to make correspondence feel like ceremony. Dr. Beatrice Holloway, the address read in elegant copperplate script. Regarding the estate of Jonathan Hale, deceased March 23, 1906. The date jolted her. 1906, exactly 100 years ago. As a historian specialising in Edwardian England, Beatrice knew the significance of centennials, how institutions loved their neat anniversaries, their commemorative exhibitions. But this felt different. This felt personal, though she couldn't say why. The solicitor's letter was brief and bewildering. Jonathan Hale, inventor and horologist, had died a century prior with an unusual testamentary clause. His workshop in Clerkenwell was to remain sealed until the centennial of his death, at which point it would pass to the guardian of future time. Through a labyrinthine chain of legal reasoning that made Beatrice's head spin, she, Dr. Beatrice Holloway, 47-year-old widow and university lecturer, had been identified as that guardian. The property was hers if she wanted it. She had 30 days to decide. Beatrice stood by her window, watching London's grey morning unfold below. Rain streaked the glass, blurring the world into impressionist smears of colour and motion. She'd been standing at windows a lot lately, watching life happen to other people. 8 months since Richard's death, and she still hadn't quite figured out how to rejoin the living. She knew Jonathan Hale's name, of course. Every scholar of the period did, though only as a footnote. The eccentric inventor who'd vanished mysteriously just before the Franco-British exhibition of 1906. Rumours had swirled. Suicide, scandal, a midnight flight to America. His workshop had become the stuff of urban legend, sealed by some strange legal mechanism no one had bothered to challenge. And now, here it sat in her hands, offered like a prize she'd never entered to win. She should have felt excited. This was the kind of discovery that made careers, the untouched primary source every historian dreamed of. But Beatrice felt only a hollow curiosity, the kind that came from having too much time and too little purpose. Richard had been dead for 8 months. 22 years of marriage, ended by a heart attack so swift he'd barely had time to look surprised. They'd been good to each other. Richard and Beatrice. Companionable. She'd loved him in the way you love a favourite sweater, comfortably, reliably, without fire. And now he was gone, and she was left with the uncomfortable realisation that she'd never truly burned for anything. Not for her academic work, not for her marriage, not even for the comfortable life they'd built in their Bloomsbury flat, with its inherited furniture and predictable routines. At 47, Beatrice found herself a cliché, the middle-aged widow with tenure, a modest pension, and the creeping suspicion that she'd sleepwalked through her one chance at passion. Her colleagues treated her with careful kindness, the kind reserved for the recently bereaved and the perpetually invisible. Dr. Whitmore, her departmental rival, had actually patted her shoulder last week, which somehow felt worse than his usual competitive sneering. She'd become that woman, the one people felt sorry for, the one whose best years were clearly behind her, the one who'd settle into dignified spinsterhood and eventually be remembered as a fine scholar. Very dedicated, the thought made her want to scream, or break something, or do anything that proved she was still capable of feeling strongly about something. The workshop, at least, promised distraction. She called the solicitor that afternoon. Clerkenwell hadn't changed much in a century, Beatrice thought, though that wasn't quite true. The streets were cleaner, the buildings converted to expensive lofts and artisan coffee shops. But the bones remained. Narrow lanes and hidden courtyards, the ghost of London's watchmaking district still visible beneath layers of gentrification. Jonathan Hale's workshop occupied the ground floor of a building squeezed between a boutique gin distillery and a graphic design studio. The entrance was modest, a weathered wooden door with a tarnished brass plate reading simply J. Hale, horologist. The solicitor's clerk, a nervous young man named Timothy, who couldn't have been more than 25, fumbled with an absurdly large key. "Been sealed since 1906, he explained unnecessarily. "The testamentary trust paid for basic maintenance, roof repairs, that sort of thing, but no one's been inside. Legal restriction." He said it with the reverence of someone who'd never met a legal restriction he didn't worship. The lock resisted, rust and time conspiring against entry. Timothy struggled, his face reddening with effort. Beatrice almost offered to help, then decided against it. Let the boy have his moment of usefulness. Finally, with a groan that sounded almost living, almost pained, the lock yielded. The door swung inward on hinges that shrieked their century of disuse, and Beatrice stepped across a threshold in time. The air inside was thick, amber-coloured in the filtered light. Dust lay over everything like snow, undisturbed and perfect. But beneath it, the workshop was eerily pristine. Tools hung in careful rows, their shapes still visible beneath the years. Workbenches held partially assembled mechanisms, as if Jonathan had simply stepped out for tea and never returned. The smell struck her immediately, oil and metal, wood polish and leather, and something else, something indefinable. The scent of stopped time, Beatrice thought, and the poetic fancy didn't feel foolish. Timothy coughed behind her, breaking the spell. "Will you be wanting the property, Dr. Holloway? I'll need an answer for the trust within the 30-day period, but if you could give me an initial indication—" "Yes," Beatrice said, not taking her eyes off the clock. "Yes, I'll take it." She heard Timothy making notes, muttering about paperwork and signatures, but his voice seemed to come from very far away. Because Beatrice couldn't look away from the clock. It dominated the space, this monument to mechanical genius and human obsession. The face was simple, Roman numerals on mother of pearl, hands frozen at 11:47. But the works behind it were baroque in their complexity. Dozens of gears, some large as dinner plates, others tiny as pinheads, all interlocked in patterns that seemed to defy mechanical logic. And at the very heart a chamber of crystalline glass, empty and waiting. Waiting for what? Beatrice wondered. And why did looking at it make her chest ache with a loss she couldn't name? Timothy eventually left, thrusting papers at her that she signed without reading. She heard the door close, heard his footsteps retreating down the lane. And then she was alone with Jonathan Hale's ghost and the silent monument to whatever obsession had consumed him. She moved through the space slowly, reverently, touching nothing at first. Just looking, cataloguing with her historian's eye. His personal effects were sparse but telling. A coat still hung on a peg by the door, heavy wool with a faint smell of pipe tobacco that had somehow survived a century. A teacup sat on the workbench, the dried residue of tea still visible at the bottom. A small brown stain like dried blood. Books lined a shelf, technical manuals on horology but also poetry. Blake, Keats, Tennyson, a man of both precision and passion then. Photographs in simple wooden frames. A stern-looking couple who must have been his parents, their Victorian severity captured in sepia. A street scene of Edwardian London in all its horse-drawn glory, optimistic and doomed and utterly unaware of the wars that were coming. And one of a young woman with dark hair pulled back in the fashion of the era, dark eyes that seemed to hold both sadness and hope. Her expression was complex, unguarded, the face of someone who knew she was dying and was trying to be brave about it. Eleanor, Beatrice thought, though she didn't know how she knew. This was Eleanor. She found the first letter tucked inside the clock itself, hidden in a small compartment behind the main face that revealed itself when she touched a particular decorative element. The compartment opened with a soft click, and there it was, an envelope addressed in that same copperplate script she'd seen on the solicitor's letter. To the Guardian of Future Time. Dated March 23rd, 1906, the day Jonathan Hale died, or disappeared, or whatever had happened to him. Beatrice's hands trembled as she opened it carefully, conscious of handling a century-old artifact. But the paper was surprisingly resilient, the ink still dark and clear, as if Jonathan had written it yesterday. Dear Guardian, if you are reading this, then my calculations were correct, and time has kept its appointment. I do not know who you are, cannot know, though I have spent many nights imagining. Are you a scholar? A clockmaker? Someone drawn by curiosity or by fate? Perhaps you are young, filled with the arrogance of discovery. Perhaps you are old, seeking meaning in the twilight of your years. Perhaps you are something I cannot even conceive. I hope you will forgive the presumption of this letter, written to a stranger who does not yet exist. But I find I must speak to someone, even if that someone is separated from me by decades or centuries. Loneliness, I have discovered, transcends time. Let me tell you why I built this workshop, this clock, this mechanism that now stands silent before you. Let me tell you about Eleanor. The name struck Beatrice like a physical blow. She looked at the photograph again, the dark-haired woman with the dying woman's eyes, and felt tears prick her own. Eleanor Ashworth was to be my wife. We met in 1903 at the exhibition of horological instruments, of all prosaic places. She was there with her father, a railway engineer, and she stopped at my display of pocket watches with such genuine interest that I quite forgot to be shy. Most people looked at my work with polite incomprehension or calculating assessment of its commercial value. Eleanor looked at it with wonder. She understood that these weren't just mechanisms, they were attempts to capture something uncapturable. Time itself. She asked me if I believed time was a tyrant or a friend. I said I wasn't certain, that perhaps it was both, generous with moments but relentless in taking them away. She smiled. And Guardian, her smile was like light breaking through storm clouds, and said perhaps the answer was to treasure each moment while we had it. Rather than mourning its loss, I should have listened to her wisdom. I should have learned that lesson then. But I was arrogant and brilliant, and certain that human ingenuity could solve any problem, even the problem of mortality. We courted for 2 years. She was brilliant, kind, utterly unimpressed by my increasing reputation in horological circles. When I explained my theories about temporal mechanics, ideas that most people dismissed as fantasy, she listened without the glazed politeness I'd learned to expect. She understood. More than that, she challenged me, pushed me to think deeper, to question my assumptions. We were to be married in September of 1906. I had never been happier. I had never felt more certain of my place in the world. In March of 1905, she began to cough. Beatrice closed her eyes, knowing what came next. In 1905, a cough meant tuberculosis more often than not. And tuberculosis, for all the Edwardian optimism about modern medicine, was still a death sentence. They called it consumption then, though I never understood the term. Nothing about Eleanor was being consumed. She was being stolen bit by bit, day by day. The doctors gave her 2 years if she was lucky, 1 if she wasn't. I watched the woman I loved grow paler, thinner, weaker. I watched the light dim in her eyes, not from despair but from simple physical exhaustion. Her body was betraying her, and I, supposed genius of mechanical innovation, could do nothing but count the days like a miser hoarding coins that slipped through his fingers regardless. That's when I began the clock. My great folly, my magnificent obsession. If I could not stop her dying, I reasoned, perhaps I could slow it. Perhaps I could create a space where time moved differently, where each moment could be stretched, savoured, made to last. I would give us infinity inside the finite. I would be the man who defeated time for love. But time, I have learned, is not so easily defeated. And love. Love is more complicated than I ever imagined. More costly, more devastating. I cannot tell you the rest of this story, not yet. There are things you must discover yourself, pieces you must find before the whole picture makes sense. But I want you to know this, Guardian. You are not here by accident. I don't believe in accidents anymore. The universe is strange and circular, and we are all connected in ways we cannot see until we step back far enough to perceive the pattern. You will understand in time. That's both promise and threat, isn't it? Understanding comes, but only with time, and time is the very thing we never have enough of. I have placed markers throughout this workshop, breadcrumbs for you to follow. When you are ready, when you have begun to understand, you will find the next letter, and the next, until finally, we meet at the end, which is also the beginning. For now, know this. I was a man who loved deeply and lost terribly. I tried to imprison time, and learned instead that time must flow, must be allowed its natural course. But my failure need not be yours. In these walls, in this clock, lies the accumulated work of my life. It is yours now, to use or to understand or simply to wonder at. I do not know if we will ever speak, you and I, across this gulf of years. But I find myself hoping that whoever you are, you will look at my work with kindness, that you will know I tried even if I failed, that you will understand I was not mad, merely desperate, that you will not be alone in your own trying. The last line struck Beatrice with devastating precision. She sat down hard on a stool, Jonathan's letter trembling in her hands. That you will not be alone in your own trying. How did he know? How could he possibly know that loneliness was the defining texture of her life right now? That she felt utterly, completely alone, in ways that had nothing to do with Richard's death, and everything to do with her own sense of having missed something essential about existence. Yours across the century, Jonathan Hale, March 23, 1906. Beatrice read the letter again, and then a third time, searching for hidden meanings, for the clues Jonathan promised. The writing was beautiful, educated but not pretentious, passionate but controlled. The hand of someone who thought carefully before committing words to paper, who understood that language was a precision instrument, not a blunt weapon. She could imagine him sitting here, perhaps at this very workbench, writing to a future he would never see. Writing to her. Because that's what it felt like. Impossibly, this letter was meant specifically for her. Not for some abstract future guardian, but for Beatrice Holloway, 47-year-old widow who'd forgotten how to feel deeply about anything. You will not be alone in your own trying. Hello, Jonathan, she whispered to the empty air, feeling only slightly foolish. I'm Beatrice. And I think I'm going to restore your clock. The words hung in the dusty silence. No response, of course. Dead men didn't answer. But Beatrice felt something shift in the atmosphere, some subtle change in the quality of the stillness. As if the workshop itself had been waiting, holding its breath and had finally exhaled. She stood and approached the clock, running her fingers along its bronze surfaces. The metal was cool, smooth, meticulously crafted. Every gear was a work of art, every spring precisely calibrated. This wasn't just a timepiece. This was a prayer made mechanical, a love letter written in brass and crystal. Near the base, almost hidden in the decorative scrollwork, she found an inscription. She had to kneel to read it, brushing away a century of dust with gentle fingers. For Eleanor, who taught me to treasure time. And for the guardian who will teach me to release it. Beatrice's vision blurred. She sat back on her heels, tears streaming down her face, not entirely sure why she was crying. For Jonathan? For Eleanor? For herself and Richard, and all the passionless years of their adequate marriage? For the fact that she was 47 and had never felt the kind of love that made someone build monuments? All of it, none of it. She cried until she was empty, until the tears stopped coming and she was left feeling hollow but somehow cleaner. Purged, when she finally stood, her knees protesting, The light in the workshop had changed. Afternoon had deepened toward evening. She'd been here for hours, lost in a century-old letter and her own grief. She should go home. Should eat something, sleep, approach this project fresh tomorrow with proper plans and protocols. But she couldn't leave. Not yet. Because something was pulling at her, some instinct she didn't quite understand. Jonathan had said there were more letters, more breadcrumbs, and suddenly, desperately, Beatrice needed to find them. She began searching systematically. Opened every drawer, examined every tool, looked behind every frame and under every surface. She found Jonathan's notebooks, leather-bound journals filled with calculations, diagrams, and increasingly frantic marginalia. She found sketches of the clock in various states of completion. She found receipts for materials, letters from colleagues, newspaper clippings about the upcoming exhibition, and in a cigar box labelled Emergencies, hidden in a drawer that only opened when she pressed a particular knothole in the workbench, she found another envelope. This one was different. Same cream paper, same wax seal, but no dust, no aging. The envelope looked fresh, as if someone had placed it there moments ago. And the address written in that familiar copperplate script made Beatrice's heart stop. Dear Beatrice, not Dear Guardian. Her name. Her actual name. Hands shaking so badly she could barely manage it, Beatrice broke the seal and pulled out the letter. The paper crackled, alive with possibility, and Jonathan's voice emerged from the page like a ghost, speaking directly into her mind. Dear Beatrice, I felt when you touched my work. The connection between us, I cannot explain it, but it thrums through the mechanism like a plucked string. Time trembled. The clock, dormant for so long, pulsed with sudden energy, and I looked up from my bench to find it glowing with light I did not generate. And I knew the future has arrived. You have arrived. I am writing this on March 24th, 1906, the day after my death or my disappearance or whatever history will record happened to me. I don't know how this letter will reach you. I don't understand the mechanism yet. But the clock knows something I don't. It responds to you across time, across the impossible distance between us. Who are you, Beatrice? The name came to me like a whisper, like knowledge planted directly in my mind by the trembling clock. How do you know my name, my work? Are you a horologist yourself? A historian? Something else entirely? Forgive me. These are practical questions when what I mean to ask is, do you feel it too? This connection that seems to transcend the years between us. I'm writing this in 1906 and you are reading it. When? A decade from now? A century more? I don't understand what's happening. But I find I don't fear it. If the universe is strange enough to connect us across time, perhaps it's strange enough for other impossibilities. Perhaps Eleanor was right when she said that time wasn't a tyrant, merely a framework, one that could be bent, shaped, transcended by will and love and desperate need. Write back if you can. I don't know if it's possible, but I have to believe it is. I have to believe that this connection isn't just one way, that somewhere in the mechanism I've built, there's a way for us to truly communicate. I'll be waiting, Beatrice. Across a century or more, I'll be waiting. Jonathan Beatrice read the letter 3 times, her mind a riot of impossible thoughts. This wasn't possible. Letters didn't travel through time. Dead men didn't correspond with the living. The date, March 24th, 1906, was the day after Jonathan had supposedly died or vanished. This had to be a hoax, some elaborate trick by the Trust or by Whitmore, or by someone with too much time and a sick sense of humour. But the handwriting matched the first letter exactly. And the paper, when she held it to the fading light, showed no signs of artificial ageing or modern manufacture. And most damning of all, Jonathan knew her name. I felt when you touched my work. She had touched it. Just minutes ago, running her hands along the bronze, kneeling to read the inscription. And she'd felt something. A thrumming, yes, exactly as Jonathan described. A sense of the mechanism responding, recognising, awakening. This is insane, Beatrice said aloud. I'm sitting in a dusty workshop, believing that a man who died 100 years ago just wrote me a letter. I'm clearly having some kind of breakdown. Richard dies. I lose my grip on reality, and now I'm manufacturing elaborate fantasies about impossible correspondence with historical figures. Next I'll be seeing ghosts and hearing voices. But even as she said it, she knew she didn't believe it. The letter was real. The connection was real. Something impossible was happening, and Beatrice, rational, sceptical, middle-aged Dr. Holloway who'd never believed in anything she couldn't cite a source for, was going to choose to believe in it. Because what was the alternative? Go home to her empty flat, her half-eaten meals, her colleagues' pitying glances. Return to the slow slide into invisible irrelevance that middle-aged widowhood seemed to promise? No. For the first time in 8 months, in longer if she was honest, Beatrice felt something like excitement. Like possibility. Like the world had just revealed itself to be stranger and more wondrous than she'd ever imagined. She pulled a pen from her bag and found a piece of paper in one of Jonathan's notebooks. Tore out a blank page, feeling only slightly guilty about the minor act of historical vandalism. And she wrote, "Dear Jonathan, my name is Beatrice Holloway, and I'm writing to you from the year 2006. That's 100 years after your... I don't know what to call it. Your death? Your disappearance? You said March 24 is the day after, so clearly you're still alive as you write this. But I'm in 2006, and according to every historical record, Jonathan Hale vanished on March 23, 1906, and was never seen again. I don't understand this any better than you do. I'm a historian, not a scientist. My knowledge of temporal mechanics extends to knowing that Einstein will prove time is relative, but that won't happen for another decade in your time, and even then, nobody will really understand what it means for another century. But yes, I feel it too. When I touched your clock, something responded. The air changed. I felt a presence, like someone watching from very far away or very long ago. I thought I was imagining it, but now I have your letter, and it's dated from 1906 and it knows my name. I don't know if this will reach you. I don't know how any of this works. But I'm going to place this letter on your workbench, in the exact spot where I found yours. And I'm going to go home and sleep, and try to convince myself I haven't lost my mind. And tomorrow I'll come back. And if this is real, if the impossible is actually happening, then maybe there will be another letter waiting. Until then, I remain Beatrice March 23rd, 2006. She placed the letter carefully on the workbench, weighting it down with a small brass gear so it wouldn't blow away. Then she stood there, feeling ridiculous and hopeful and terrified, staring at the paper as if she could will it to vanish, to prove that time travel was possible through sheer force of wanting. Nothing happened. Of course nothing happened. You didn't get to watch time travel occur. That wasn't how it worked, if it worked at all, which it almost certainly didn't, except that Jonathan's letter was real, and knew her name and described exactly what she'd felt when she touched the clock. "Good night, Jonathan," she whispered to the silent workshop. "If you're really there, if this is really happening, I'll see you tomorrow." She left, locking the door behind her, and walked home through Clerkenwell's evening streets. London bustled around her, taxis and tourists, the smell of restaurant kitchens, the glow of screens in every window. The modern world, bright and loud and utterly mundane, and somewhere, somehow, 100 years in the past, a man sat in a workshop and waited for her reply. Beatrice didn't sleep that night. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment in the workshop, analysing, questioning, trying to find the rational explanation that would make this make sense. But the letter sat on her nightstand, impossible and undeniable, and Jonathan's words echoed in her mind. "Do you feel it too?" Yes. God help her, yes. When dawn finally broke, grey and uncertain through her bedroom window, Beatrice was already dressed. She'd chosen her clothes carefully, not her usual academic uniform of sensible skirt and cardigan, but something softer. A dress the colour of aged wine, a scarf Richard had given her that she'd never worn. If she was going mad, she'd at least look good doing it. She reached the workshop just after 7, hands trembling as she unlocked the door. The space looked exactly as she'd left it, dust undisturbed, tools in their places, the great clock silent and waiting. The workbench was empty. Her letter was gone, and in its place, weighted down by the same brass gear she'd used, lay a new envelope. Beatrice crossed the space in 3 strides, seized the envelope, tore it open with shaking fingers. Jonathan's handwriting spilled across the page, and even though she'd known, had hoped, had believed, the reality of it still stole her breath. Beatrice, it worked. I placed my letter on the workbench last night, and this morning it was gone. And in its place your words, your impossible, wonderful words. You're real. You're from 2006. We're actually communicating across time. I've been pacing the workshop since dawn, trying to process this. 100 years. You're reading my words 100 years after I write them, and I'm reading yours from a century in my future. The temporal mechanics alone should make this impossible. Causality, entropy, every law of physics I understand says this cannot happen. But it is happening. The clock is the bridge somehow. When I place my hand on it now, I can feel you. Not just abstractly. I can sense your presence, your consciousness, touching the same mechanism from a century ahead. It's like 2 people separated by a vast ocean, each placing their hand on opposite sides of a paper-thin wall. So close, impossibly distant. Tell me about yourself, Beatrice. Tell me about your world. Tell me how Jonathan Hale is remembered or forgotten. Tell me everything, already yours across the century. Beatrice pressed the letter to her chest, laughing and crying at the same time, feeling something vast and terrifying and absolutely wonderful bloom in her chest. The correspondence had begun. Over the following days, Beatrice and Jonathan built a bridge of words across time. The mechanism was maddeningly inconsistent. Sometimes her letters would be answered within hours, sometimes it took days. Jonathan explained, in one of his increasingly passionate missives, that the clock seemed to require energy to open the temporal channel, energy it drew from somewhere. His working theory involved quantum entanglement and the conservation of causality, but he admitted it was mostly guesswork dressed up in scientific language. What mattered was that they could communicate. And through that communication, they began to truly know each other. Jonathan wrote about his London, the city on the brink of the Franco-British exhibition, streets filled with optimism about the new century and anxiety about German competition. He described the smog, thick as soup on bad days, that turned the city into something from a Gothic novel. The sound of horses on cobblestones, the smell of coal smoke and flowers from street vendors, the constant industrial hum that was Edwardian London's soundtrack. He painted pictures with words, bringing 1906 alive in ways Beatrice's academic research never had. The world here feels poised on the edge of something, he wrote. Like we're all holding our breath, waiting for the future to arrive and tell us what we're meant to become. There's such confidence everywhere. Empire, progress, civilization spreading inexorably across the globe. And underneath barely acknowledged a kind of anxiety, as if we all suspect that this can't last, that something is coming that will break this beautiful, terrible world apart. Beatrice, reading this in the quiet of the workshop, felt tears prick her eyes. Because she knew what was coming. World War I, just 8 years away in Jonathan's timeline. The war that would slaughter a generation, that would break the Edwardian confidence forever, that would make innocence impossible. Did she tell him? Could she? What were the ethics of knowing someone's future? She decided on partial honesty. The world you're waiting for does arrive. And it's harder than you imagine. More wonderful too in ways you can't conceive. But yes, something is coming that will change everything. I can't tell you what. I don't know if I should, but Jonathan, treasure these moments. This optimism, this certainty, Treasure it while it lasts. His response came swiftly. You're warning me. About what, war? Catastrophe? Beatrice, you cannot leave me in suspense. Tell me what you know. I can't, she wrote back. Causality, remember? If you know the future, you might try to change it, and then where would I be? Perhaps writing to a completely different Jonathan in a completely different timeline, or perhaps I'd cease to exist entirely. Time travel comes with responsibilities I'm not prepared to handle. Then let's not speak of the future, Jonathan replied. Or rather, let's speak only of my future that is your past. Tell me, how did it end? My life, my work. You said I disappeared in 1906. What happened to me? Beatrice sat with this question for a long time. The truth was she didn't know. The historical record was maddeningly vague. Jonathan Hale, promising inventor and horologist, vanished on March 23, 1906. His workshop was found locked from the inside, but he was gone. No body, no note, no explanation. Speculation ranged from suicide to murder to a voluntary disappearance. The mystery had intrigued scholars for decades, but no one had ever solved it. You vanish, she wrote finally. On March 23, 1906, the date on your first letter, your workshop is found sealed but empty. No one ever sees you again. Some think you killed yourself. Others speculate you fled the country. But there's no evidence either way. You just disappear into history. March 23rd, Jonathan wrote back. Tomorrow, or rather yesterday for you. The day I wrote the first letter. Beatrice, I think that's the day I complete the clock. The day I try to activate it fully. Whatever happens to me, it happens then. Then don't complete it, Beatrice wrote urgently. Don't activate it, just stop. Live your life. Let history forget you if it means you get to survive, and never speak to you again. Never have this connection. Jonathan's response was immediate. Beatrice, these letters are the most alive I've felt since Eleanor died. If disappearing is the cost of having this with you, I'll pay it gladly. The words struck Beatrice like a physical blow. She sat in the workshop, Jonathan's letters shaking in her hands, and realised with stunning clarity she was falling in love. With a man who'd been dead for a century, with words on paper and a presence she felt through a clock, with someone she'd never seen, never touched, who existed only in letters and the trembling of brass gears. It was absurd, impossible, and utterly, completely true. She wrote back with trembling honesty. Jonathan, I need to tell you something about myself. Something I've never told anyone, not even my husband. I married a good man named Richard. We were together for 22 years. He died 8 months ago. Heart attack, sudden, merciful in its swiftness. We had a good marriage. Comfortable. We were friends who shared a bed and a mortgage and a life that looked from the outside perfectly content. But I never burned for him, Jonathan. I never woke aching for his presence. We never had the kind of passion that makes people do foolish things, that makes the world disappear. We were safe with each other, predictable, and I thought that was enough. I thought that was what love looked like when you were mature, sensible, realistic about life. Now he's gone. And I'm 47 years old, and I realise I've never felt what I'm starting to feel reading your letters. This urgency, this hunger to know everything about you, this sense that time between your responses is time wasted. I've never felt this way before, Jonathan. Not in all my 22 years of marriage. Not ever. What does that say about me? That I'm more alive corresponding with a dead man than I ever was with my living husband. She sent the letter before she could second-guess herself, placing it on the workbench with shaking hands. Then she left quickly, afraid of what she'd revealed, what she'd admitted to herself as much as to Jonathan. His response was waiting the next morning. Beatrice, what it says about you is that you're human, that you're capable of more than the safe, comfortable life you built, that you're braver than you give yourself credit for. I understand what you're describing more than you know. Eleanor and I had passion, yes, the consuming, devastating kind, but I wonder sometimes if what we had was love or desperation. We were clinging to each other against the inevitable, trying to hold back death through sheer force of feeling. When she got sick, our love became frantic. Every moment was shadowed by countdown. We couldn't simply be together. We had to maximize every instant, extract every drop of meaning. It was exhausting. Beautiful, but exhausting. By the end, I think we were both just tired. What I'm feeling now, writing to you, it's different. There's no pressure to optimize time, because we have no time together anyway. We can't touch, can't see each other, can't build a conventional life. All we have are words and honesty. And perhaps that's freeing. Perhaps this is what love looks like when it's stripped of all the practical considerations, all the daily negotiations of coexistence. You say you're 47 and never burned before. I'm 34, and I burned once so intensely I nearly destroyed myself. Neither of us has had an ordinary experience of love. Perhaps that means we're perfectly suited for this extraordinary circumstance. Tell me, Beatrice, if we could meet, if the century between us could somehow dissolve, would you want that? Or is this safer, this love that exists only in words? Beatrice read the question 3 times, her heart hammering. Would she want to meet him? Truly meet him in the flesh with all the awkwardness and reality that entailed. Yes, she wrote back. God help me, yes. I want to know what you look like when you think no one is watching. I want to hear your laugh. Is it loud and unrestrained, or quiet and intimate? I want to know if you fidget when you're thinking, if you talk with your hands, if you have any scars and how you got them. I want all the small mundane details that letters can never convey. I want to touch you, Jonathan. I want to know if your hands are as warm as I imagine, if you smell like the workshop oils and tobacco I can still detect in your coat. I want one moment of reality to anchor all these words to, but I'm also terrified. What if we met and I disappointed you? What if the woman you're imagining from my letters is more interesting than the reality? I'm 47, Jonathan. I have grey in my hair and lines around my eyes and a body that's comfortable rather than striking. What if you looked at me and saw just a middle-aged woman? Ordinary, forgettable. His response made her cry. Beatrice, I have spent the last week imagining you in 100 different ways. Young, old, beautiful, plain, every variation. And here is what I know, none of it matters. Because what I'm falling in love with isn't a face or a body. It's the mind that writes these letters. The honesty that admits to never burning before. The courage to reach across time to a stranger and say, I see you. That's what I'm in love with. That's what makes you extraordinary. And if we ever do meet, if the impossible becomes possible, I promise you this, I will see you. Not the surface, not the age or the grey hair or any of that. I'll see the woman who restored my clock, who brought my workshop back to life, who taught me that connection is possible even across death itself. You could never disappoint me, Beatrice. You're already more than I ever hoped for. Over the following weeks, their letters grew longer, more intimate, more essential. They wrote about everything, childhood memories and adult regrets, philosophical debates and silly observations. Jonathan told her about learning clockmaking from his grandfather, about the moment he realised he could see time as something physical, manipulable. Beatrice shared her journey into academia, the years of fighting to be taken seriously as a woman in a male-dominated field, the quiet satisfaction of finally achieving respect, even if it came with invisibility. They sent each other fragments of poetry, recommendations for books. Jonathan introduced Beatrice to music hall songs she'd never heard. She tried to describe films to him, that impossible future invention where stories moved on screens. He was fascinated by everything about her world, the technology, the social changes, the way women could be scholars and live independently. Your time sounds simultaneously marvellous and lonely, he wrote. All this connection through machines, but less actual human contact. Is that fair? Painfully fair, Beatrice admitted. We can communicate instantly with people across the globe, but we're more isolated than ever. I can go days without meaningful conversation, without being seen by anyone who matters. I see you, Jonathan wrote. Across a century, through the impossible medium of this clock. I see you, Beatrice. But beneath the growing intimacy, tension was building. Because Jonathan's letters began mentioning his work on the clock with increasing frequency. He was completing it, piece by piece, driven by obsession and the need to understand what connected them. The mechanism is nearly functional, he wrote in early April, his time. I believe I can create a stable temporal field, a bubble where time moves differently. If I'm right, it might allow more than just letters. It might allow presence, some form of being together. But I remember what you told me about my disappearance. March 23rd. That's past now in my timeline. I'm still here, which means either history has changed or your records were incomplete. Either way, I'm proceeding. I have to know, Beatrice. I have to understand what we've stumbled into. Beatrice felt cold dread reading this. Jonathan, be careful, please. Whatever happened to you originally, it's connected to this clock. Don't push too hard. Don't risk yourself for... She stopped, unable to finish. For what? For her? For the possibility of meeting? What right did she have to ask him to sacrifice his safety for her desires? But Jonathan understood what she couldn't say. For us, he finished in his next letter. You were going to say, don't risk myself for us. But Beatrice, what is life if not risks for the people who matter? You matter. This connection matters. I'm going to keep working. Meanwhile, Beatrice's own world was intruding. Dr. Whitmore had been asking pointed questions about her time at the workshop. How was the cataloguing going? When would she be ready to present findings to the department? There were rumours she was fixated, obsessive, the concerned whispers of colleagues who'd decided she was having some sort of breakdown. And perhaps she was. Perhaps spending hours every day writing letters to a dead man and believing he wrote back was the definition of losing one's grip on reality. But Beatrice had never felt more sane, more alive, more herself than she did in that dusty workshop exchanging impossible correspondence with Jonathan Hale. One afternoon, she arrived to find Dr. Whitmore waiting outside the workshop door. Beatrice, he said, his tone carefully neutral. We need to talk about the Hale property. Not now, Thomas. Beatrice moved to unlock the door, but Whitmore stepped in front of it. The university is concerned. You've been spending excessive time here, you've withdrawn from your normal duties, and you haven't produced any preliminary findings. There's talk of revoking your access, having the space professionally evaluated. It's my property, Beatrice said coldly. Legally transferred. The university has no claim, but you're a university employee, and if you're experiencing some sort of mental health crisis, I'm not. Beatrice's voice was steel. I'm doing research, important research, and I'll present findings when I'm ready, not on your timeline or the department's. Beatrice, please. Whitmore's expression softened into something almost kind, which was worse than his usual competitive sneer. We're worried about you. First Richard, now this obsession with a dead inventor. People are saying you're not coping well, that maybe you need help. What I need, Beatrice interrupted, is for you to leave me alone. Thank you for your concern, Thomas. It's noted and dismissed. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have work to do. She pushed past him, unlocked the door and slammed it in his face. Then she leaned against it, breathing hard, hands shaking with anger and fear. Because Whitmore was voicing what she'd been trying not to think, everyone thought she was losing her mind, and if they decided she was unstable, they could take the workshop away. Could force her into treatment, into therapy, into admitting that the letters were delusion. Could separate her from Jonathan. She couldn't let that happen. She found Jonathan's latest letter waiting on the workbench and tore it open with desperate hands. Beatrice, something's happened. I don't know how to explain this, so I'll just state it plainly. I found your photograph. I was working on the clock's internal mechanisms, and wedged behind one of the gear assemblies was a photograph. Modern photograph. The quality, the colour saturation, everything about it screams future technology. And it's you, Beatrice. You standing in this workshop, looking at the camera with an expression I can't quite read. Joy, sadness, both? But here's what's impossible. On the back of the photograph, in my own handwriting, is a date. March 23rd, 1906, the day I supposedly disappeared. Hand words, the Guardian and the Clockmaker. She taught me everything. I didn't write that, Beatrice. Or rather, I haven't written it yet. But apparently I will. Which means... What, that we do meet? That the clock allows more than just letters. That on March 23rd, which already passed for me but perhaps is repeating, or perhaps time is more flexible than I thought, something happens that brings us together. I'm frightened and exhilarated in equal measure. Tell me, have you seen this photograph in your time? Does it exist in 2006? Beatrice's heart was racing. She set down the letter and began searching the workshop frantically, looking for the photograph Jonathan described. She checked every drawer, every surface, behind every gear in the clock mechanism. Nothing, no photograph, which meant either it hadn't appeared in her timeline yet, or it appeared only when she needed to find it. Causality was getting tangled, and Beatrice's historian's mind was struggling to track the loops. She wrote back, "I haven't found it yet." "But Jonathan, your handwriting on the back, she taught me everything. What does that mean?" "What do I teach you?" "I don't know," he replied. "But I intend to find out. The clock is nearly complete. Perhaps one more week of work, 2 at most. And then I'm going to activate it fully. I'm going to try to create a stable temporal intersection. A place where 1906 and 2006 can coexist, where we can meet not just through letters but in reality. It's dangerous, I know. The theories suggest massive energy requirements, possible causality violations, risks I can't fully calculate. But Beatrice, I've spent the last weeks falling in love with you across an impossible distance. If there's even a chance we could meet, I have to take it. Don't try to stop me. Please, I know you'll worry, I know you'll think of every rational objection, but just this once let me be irrational. Let me pursue the impossible because it might lead to you." Beatrice sat with his letter for hours, tears streaming down her face. He was going to risk everything, and she couldn't stop him, couldn't even warn him effectively, because time was already tangled. Whatever was going to happen had perhaps already happened, or was happening simultaneously across their different timelines, or would happen in some future moment that was also the past. Her head ached trying to pass it, but her heart was clear. She loved him. Across every impossibility, every rational objection, every law of physics, she loved Jonathan Hale, and if he was willing to risk everything to meet her, how could she do any less? She wrote her reply with shaking hands, then finish it. Complete the clock. Create your temporal intersection. I'll be here, Jonathan, on my March 23rd, which is still months away in my timeline, but perhaps we'll meet there anyway. I'll be waiting in this workshop at exactly 11:47 p.m, the time your clock stopped. And if the impossible is possible, if love really can transcend causality, then I'll see you soon. She sent the letter and went home in a daze. That night, she pulled out Richard's photo albums, looking at pictures of their life together. Their wedding, both of them young and uncertain, holidays, birthdays, the accumulated evidence of 22 adequate years. Richard smiled from the photos, kind and comfortable and utterly unaware that his widow would one day fall desperately in love with a century-old ghost. "I'm sorry," Beatrice whispered to his image. "I did love you, I did. But I never felt this, Richard. I never felt like my heart might actually burst from wanting someone." "Is that terrible? Am I terrible?" Richard's photo didn't answer. But Beatrice hoped he'd understand. He'd been a good man. He'd have wanted her to burn at least once before she died. The next morning, she found Jonathan's final letter of this exchange waiting. "It's done. The clock is complete. Tomorrow, my March 23rd, which seems to be happening again or perhaps never stopped happening, I'm going to activate it at 11:47 p.m, the exact time it stopped originally. I believe that's when the temporal resonance is strongest. If I'm right, I'll create a space where both our timelines intersect. A moment that exists in both 1906 and 2006 simultaneously. And, Beatrice, if you're there, if you come to the workshop on your March 23rd at 11:47, we'll finally meet. I'm terrified. What if I disappoint you? What if the reality can't match what we've built in letters? But I'm also more certain than I've ever been of anything. I love you. Across time, across death, across every impossible obstacle, I love you. And tomorrow I'm going to prove that love is stronger than causality. Until we meet. Jonathan P.S. If something goes wrong, if the mechanism fails or the paradox collapses or any of the 1,000 things that could go wrong do go wrong, know this. These weeks with you have been the happiest of my life. You gave me back hope, Beatrice. Whatever happens next, thank you for that gift. Beatrice pressed the letter to her chest, crying and laughing simultaneously. Tomorrow. Her March 23rd was months away still, but somehow she knew it didn't matter. Time was already collapsed around them, already spiralling into the convergence Jonathan was creating. She would meet him. She would finally meet him. And whatever happened after that, whether they had moments or years, whether the universe allowed it or tore them apart, it would be worth it. It would be worth everything. The letters stopped coming. For 3 days, Beatrice arrived at the workshop to find the workbench empty. No new envelope, no response to her increasingly frantic messages. She wrote to Jonathan daily, demanding answers, begging for confirmation that he was safe, that the clock hadn't destroyed him in his attempt to complete it. Nothing. On the 4th day, she found something different. Not a letter, but a journal. It appeared on the workbench overnight, leather-bound and worn, filled with Jonathan's handwriting but in a different form, hastier, more fragmented. A diary rather than correspondence. The first entry was dated February 1905. Eleanor's cough is worse. The doctor said tuberculosis probable but wants more tests. She's frightened. I'm terrified. We're supposed to marry in September. How do I marry a dying woman? How do I not? Beatrice's hands trembled as she read, knowing she was invading Jonathan's private grief, but unable to stop. The entries continued, documenting Eleanor's decline with clinical precision that barely masked Jonathan's anguish. March 1905. She's fading. Every day a little more life drains out of her. I'm building the clock, working day and night. If I can slow time locally, I can give us more moments together. It's theoretically possible. Temporal dilation, just like Einstein will eventually prove. But I need more time. Ironically, June 1905, Eleanor knows she's dying. She's accepted it with grace I can't match. She asked me today if I'd move on after she's gone, find someone else. I told her never. She laughed. Cruel for her to laugh, but also perfectly Eleanor. Don't be dramatic, Jonathan, she said. Hearts are more resilient than your fancy clocks. I wanted to argue, but she started coughing blood, and the moment passed. August 1905. The chamber is ready. The theoretical work is sound. I can create a localized temporal field where time moves at a different rate. Eleanor could have years inside, while only days pass outside. It's perfect. It's the answer. Tomorrow I show her. The next entry made Beatrice's blood run cold. September 1st, 1905. Eleanor has agreed to enter the chamber. I told her the risks, told her it's untested, that I can't guarantee what will happen. She said she'd rather risk the unknown than accept the certainty of death. We're doing it tomorrow. A wedding day repurposed. Instead of vows and experiment. Instead of until death do us part, perhaps we'll have until time itself breaks. I'm terrified. I've never been more certain of anything. Beatrice knew what came next. Jonathan had told her in letters. Eleanor entering the chamber, something going wrong, the loop that trapped her in infinite repetition. But reading it in Jonathan's own contemporary account was different. More visceral. More devastating, September 3rd, 1905. God forgive me. God forgive me. God forgive me, she's dead. Eleanor is dead. Not from tuberculosis. From what I did to her. The chamber didn't slow time. It stopped it. Completely. She was frozen in a single instant, conscious, aware, unable to move or speak or age or die. I could see her eyes tracking, her mouth trying to form words. She was trapped in eternity, experiencing every millisecond as an hour, every second as a day. I kept the chamber running for 47 hours before I realised my error. For her, those 47 hours were, I can't calculate it, centuries, millennia, subjective eternity in a frozen moment. When I finally shut it down and pulled her out, she collapsed. The tuberculosis was still there. Time hadn't moved for her body either. But her mind, she'd been conscious for what felt like forever. The human psyche isn't built for that. We're meant to experience time linearly, with breaks, with sleep, with the mercy of forgetting. Eleanor experienced every instant, unable to forget, unable to escape. When she came out, she couldn't speak. Couldn't do anything but stare and shake. I held her for 3 days while her body finally died. But her mind was already gone. I'd killed her, trying to save her. I am a monster. I built a hell and put the woman I loved inside it. The entries became sporadic after that. Jonathan documenting his guilt, his attempts to dismantle the clock, his growing realization that the mechanism had created something he couldn't fully understand or control. October 1905. The clock won't stay dormant. I've tried to disassemble it, but the temporal chamber remains active. Not trapping anything now, just existing, creating ripples in time. I feel them sometimes, like presences watching from the future. Is someone there? Is the chamber still functioning, just differently? December 1905. I've reconfigured the mechanism. If the chamber can't be shut down, perhaps it can be repurposed. Instead of trapping someone in a moment, perhaps it can create a bridge between moments, connect different times. I'm going to try using it as a communication device. If it works, I can send messages forward. Perhaps someone in the future will understand what I couldn't. Perhaps they can succeed where I failed. March 1906. It's working. The letters pass through. I don't know who's receiving them yet. Don't know if anyone is. But I write to the guardian of future time, and the letters disappear. And sometimes I swear I feel a response, a trembling in the mechanism. Someone touching my work from decades or centuries ahead. March 22nd, 1906. Tomorrow is the anniversary of my disappearance, or so I've decided. Tomorrow I'll activate the full mechanism. I've spent the last 6 months perfecting it. If I'm right, I can create a stable temporal intersection, a space where 2 different times coexist. I can undo what I did to Eleanor. I can fix it, or I'll destroy myself trying. Either way, this ends tomorrow. The journal ended there. But tucked inside the back cover, Beatrice found something else. A folded piece of paper, newer than the journal, with her name written on the outside in Jonathan's hand. She unfolded it with shaking fingers. Beatrice, if you're reading this, then the journal appeared in your time as intended. Good. You need to understand what happened with Eleanor before we go any further. You need to know what I'm capable of, what I did in the name of love. I killed her, Beatrice. Not intentionally, but the result is the same. I was so arrogant, so certain that my intelligence could solve the problem of death. I built a prison and called it salvation. And Eleanor paid the price. The photograph you asked about, I found it again today. Or rather, I found it first. Time is becoming unstable around me. I'm experiencing moments out of sequence, seeing futures that might be or pasts that never were. In one version of events, you and I meet on March 23rd. In another, I complete the clock and destroy myself. In a third, you never come to the workshop at all. and I vanish alone into whatever void the mechanism creates. But in the version where we meet, in that impossible, beautiful timeline, the photograph shows us together. You're smiling, but there's sorrow in your eyes. And on the back I've written, "She taught me everything. I don't know yet what you teach me. But I'm starting to suspect. The clock is dangerous, Beatrice. More dangerous than I admitted in my letters. The temporal chamber doesn't just connect times, it begins to collapse them. The longer it runs, the more reality around it freezes. When I put Eleanor inside, I didn't just trap her. I started a cascade that would eventually freeze the entire world, given enough time. That's what I've learned from studying the mechanism. The chamber is like a black hole for time. It consumes causality, creating an expanding sphere where nothing can change, nothing can move. Eleanor experienced eternity in her moment. But if the chamber had kept running, eventually everyone would have experienced that same hell. I stopped it before that could happen. Barely. But here's what you need to know. When I activate the clock fully, when I create the temporal intersection that might let us meet, I'm risking that same cascade. If we stay too long in the intersection, if we maintain the connection too strongly, we'll start to freeze time around us. We'll trap everyone in the same eternal moment Eleanor suffered, and unlike with Eleanor, I won't be able to shut it down. Because we'll be inside the effect, Beatrice. We'll be the cause and the trapped simultaneously. So here's my confession. I know the risk. I know that meeting you might destroy the world, and I'm going to do it anyway, because you asked me once if I believed in destiny. I do now. I believe you were meant to find my workshop. I believe we were meant to connect across this impossible distance. And I believe that whatever happens when we meet, whether we have moments or years, whether the universe allows it or punishes us, will be worth the cost. But you deserve to know the cost before you commit. You deserve to understand that loving me might mean choosing me over literally everything else. Over history, causality, the continued existence of reality itself. I'm not asking you to make that choice lightly. I'm asking you to make it knowing everything. If you still want to meet, if you're still willing to risk the impossible, then come to the workshop on March 23rd at 11:47 p.m. I'll be waiting, but if you don't come, I'll understand. And I'll shut down the clock forever. I'll accept that some connections, however profound, weren't meant to manifest. I'll live whatever remains of my life, knowing I loved once across time. And it was beautiful, and it was enough. The choice is yours. Beatrice, all my love across every distance. Jonathan Beatrice read the letter 3 times, her mind reeling. The risk was even worse than she'd understood. Meeting Jonathan didn't just mean personal danger. It meant potentially trapping the entire world in frozen time, making everyone experience what Eleanor had experienced. Conscious eternity in a single moment. It was monstrous. Unthinkable. She couldn't do it. But God, she wanted to. She stood and paced the workshop, Jonathan's confession in her hand. Around her, his tools hung silent. His coat still smelled faintly of tobacco. The photograph he'd mentioned hadn't appeared in her timeline yet, but she could imagine it. The two of them standing together, impossible and real. What would she choose? Jonathan or the world? Love or responsibility? Before she could decide, the workshop door burst open. Dr. Whitmore stood in the entrance, flanked by 2 university administrators and a woman Beatrice didn't recognise. Severe suit, clipboard, the air of official authority. Dr. Holloway, Whitmore said, and his voice carried the satisfaction of someone who'd been proven right. This is Dr. Sarah Chen from the university's wellness services. We've been granted authorization to conduct a welfare check. There are serious concerns about your mental state. Get out. Beatrice's voice was cold steel. This is private property. You have no right. We have every right when a colleague is clearly experiencing a psychological crisis. Whitmore stepped into the workshop, his eyes moving greedily over the clock, the tools, the scattered letters. Look at this place, Beatrice. You've been spending 16-hour days in a dusty workshop, writing letters to a man who's been dead for a century. You're claiming to be communicating with him. That's not research. That's delusion. You don't understand. I understand perfectly. Whitmore picked up one of her letters to Jonathan, read it with growing alarm. My God, you really believe it, don't you? You think he's writing back? He turned to Dr. Chen. This is worse than we thought. She needs immediate psychiatric evaluation. I'm not delusional. Beatrice's voice rose, desperate. The letters are real. The connection is real. Jonathan Hale died in 1906. Whitmore interrupted, his voice gentle now, which was somehow worse than his earlier triumph. Beatrice, please. Let us help you. You've been through trauma. Losing Richard, the isolation, the pressure. It's understandable that you'd create a fantasy to cope. But it's not healthy. You need treatment. Beatrice looked around wildly. At Jonathan's journal lying open on the workbench. At the letters scattered everywhere, the evidence of their impossible correspondence. At the clock, which was beginning to glow faintly, responding to the emotional intensity in the room. You can't take this from me, she whispered. Please, you don't understand what's at stake. What's at stake is your health, your career, your life. Whitmore gestured to the administrators. We're having the workshop secured for proper historical evaluation. You'll be placed on medical leave pending psychiatric assessment. I'm sorry, Beatrice, but this is for your own good. They started forward, and Beatrice did something she'd never done in her careful, controlled academic life. She snapped, "No!" She moved to block the clock, spreading her arms protectively. You can't, I won't let you. Jonathan is counting on me. I have to be here on March 23rd. I have to... Beatrice, today is March 23rd, Dr. Chen said gently, consultation notes appearing in her hand. It's 6:47 p.m. You've been talking about this date for weeks as if it's in the future, but it's now. Whatever you thought was going to happen, it's not going to happen. The word struck Beatrice like a physical blow. She pulled out her phone, checked the date. March 23rd, 2006. The day had arrived without her even realizing. Time had been moving forward while she was lost in Jonathan's letters, and now the appointed moment was just 5 hours away. Then I have to stay, she said urgently. You have to let me stay, please, just until midnight. Just a few more hours. If nothing happens by then, I'll go with you. I'll get help. But please, just give me until midnight. Whitmore and Dr. Chen exchanged glances. Some silent communication passed between them. Beatrice, Dr. Chen said carefully. What do you think is going to happen at midnight? I don't know, Beatrice admitted, her voice breaking. But Jonathan said he'd be here. He said we'd meet. And I have to at least try. Even if it's delusional, even if I am losing my mind, please. Let me have this one last attempt. If I'm wrong, I'll accept whatever help you think I need. But if I'm right, she couldn't finish. Because if she was right, what then? Meet Jonathan and risk freezing the world? Refuse him and live with the regret forever? 1 hour, Whitmore said finally. We'll wait outside for 1 hour. If nothing happens by 7:47, we're taking you to the hospital for evaluation. Agreed? It wasn't enough time. Jonathan had said 11:47, not 7:47, but Beatrice nodded, knowing she had no leverage. Agreed. They left, though Beatrice could see them through the window standing guard. Making sure she didn't flee. Protecting her from herself. She had 1 hour. 1 hour to decide what she was willing to risk, to sacrifice, to become. She sat at Jonathan's workbench and pulled out paper. Started writing what might be her last letter to him. Jonathan, they think I'm crazy. Maybe I am. But in 1 hour they're going to take me away. Get me help. Separate me from this workshop and these letters and you. I'll probably never be allowed back here. The university will seal the space, catalogue everything, put it in archives where I can't access it. This is my last chance to write to you. My last chance to say all the things I should have said earlier. I love you. I've never said it plainly, but I'm saying it now. I love you across a century, across every rational objection. You've made me feel more alive in a few weeks than I felt in decades of living. You've shown me I'm capable of passion, of burning, of loving so deeply it transforms reality itself. But I can't meet you. I can't do what you're asking, not because I don't want to. God, Jonathan, I want it more than I've wanted anything. But I've read your confession. I understand the risk. And I can't, I won't, condemn the world to eternal suffering just to have a few moments with you. Eleanor experienced hell in that chamber. You've carried that guilt for a year. How could I ask you to repeat that mistake on a global scale? How could I live with myself knowing I chose my happiness over billions of people's freedom? So I'm not coming at 11:47. I'm going to let them take me away. Let them call it delusion. Let them medicate me. Let them erase these weeks as psychotic break. It doesn't matter. What matters is that the world keeps moving, keeps living, keeps experiencing time as it should. But know this. You were real to me. This connection was real. And in some timeline, some version of events where physics allows the impossible without consequences, we're together. We have our moment, and it's everything we imagined. I'm going to believe in that timeline, even if I never get to live it. I love you. I release you. Be at peace, Jonathan. Forever yours across the impossible distance, Beatrice. She folded the letter, placed it on the workbench, and stood. 53 minutes left before Whitmore and the others returned. 53 minutes to say goodbye to the workshop, to Jonathan, to the woman she'd become in these walls. She moved slowly through the space, touching each tool, each surface. Memorizing the smell of oil and dust, the quality of light through dirty windows, the particular silence that lived here. This place had been her sanctuary, her transformation. She'd arrived a half-dead widow and discovered she could still feel, still love, still burn. That was worth something, even if the love could never be consummated. At 7:30 she sat in front of the clock. The great silent mechanism that had connected her to Jonathan. She placed her hand on it, feeling for that trembling she'd learned to recognize, the sense of his presence across time. Nothing. The clock was cold, dormant. Perhaps Jonathan had already tried and failed to create his temporal intersection. Perhaps he'd died in the attempt. Perhaps this was simply the end of their impossible story. "Thank you," Beatrice whispered to the mechanism. "For giving me this. For showing me I was still capable of it. I won't forget." At 7:45, footsteps approached outside. Whitmore, Dr. Chen, the others coming to collect her. Beatrice stood, straightened her clothes, prepared to face what came next with as much dignity as she could muster. The door opened, but instead of Whitmore, a stranger entered. Or not a stranger. A woman in her 80s, moving slowly but with purpose, her eyes sharp despite her age. She looked at Beatrice with an expression of profound recognition. "Dr. Holloway," the woman said. "We haven't met, but I'm Margaret Chen, Dr. Sarah Chen's grandmother." She glanced back toward the window where the others waited. "I convinced them to give me a few minutes with you first. Told them it was important, elder to elder. They think I'm going to talk sense into you." "Are you?" Beatrice asked warily. "Quite the opposite." Margaret closed the door behind her and pulled an envelope from her bag. Old envelope, cream paper, wax seal. "My great-grandfather was Jonathan Hale." Beatrice's heart stopped. "He didn't die in 1906, Margaret continued. "Not exactly, he disappeared, yes, but he reappeared 3 days later. Changed. Different. He wouldn't explain what happened, but he lived until 1953. Had a family. My grandmother was his daughter. But the records were incomplete. Deliberately obscured. Because what happened to him was impossible, and he wanted to protect the people who came after." Margaret held out the envelope. "He left this, with instructions that it should be delivered to you, specifically on this date, at this time, by a family member. He described you perfectly, Dr. Holloway. Right down to the silver in your hair and the way you stand like you're always bracing for disappointment. Beatrice took the envelope with shaking hands. Her name was written on it in Jonathan's handwriting. Below it a date, to be delivered March 23rd, 2006, 7:47 p.m. How did he know? Beatrice whispered. How did he know exactly when, exactly who? Because he met you. Margaret said simply. He told my grandmother years later about the woman who visited him from the future, who loved him enough to let him go, who taught him that some sacrifices are made not out of weakness, but out of strength. Beatrice opened the letter, tears already streaming. My darling Beatrice, if you're reading this, then time has bent as I hoped it would. Margaret is delivering this at precisely 7:47 p.m. on March 23rd, 2006. I know this because I'm writing it from 7:47 p.m. on March 23rd, 1906, exactly 100 years ago to the minute, and I know what you just did. What you chose. I know because I can see the letter you wrote me, the one where you say you can't come, the one where you choose the world over us. I'm crying as I write this, not from sorrow, from overwhelming love and pride, because you did what I couldn't do with Eleanor. You chose the moral path even though it broke your heart. You proved that love doesn't mean possession or even connection. Sometimes love means sacrifice. You taught me everything, Beatrice. That's what I wrote on our photograph, the one that exists in a timeline that never quite manifested. You taught me that trying to hold on to love destroys it. That real love requires the courage to let go. So I'm letting go too. At 11:47 tonight, in both our times, simultaneously, I'm going to destroy the clock completely, dismantle the temporal chamber, break the mechanisms beyond repair, end the possibility of our meeting forever. It's the only way to make sure no one else suffers what Eleanor suffered. To make sure the world keeps moving, keeps living. But here's what I want you to know. Because of you, I don't die in 1906. I dismantle the clock, and I live. I find peace with Eleanor's death. I eventually remarry, a kind woman named Catherine. We have children. I die at 81, surrounded by family, having lived a full and satisfying life. And every day of that life I carry you with me. Not as regret, but as inspiration. You showed me how to love without grasping, how to treasure moments without trying to imprison them, how to let go with grace. I'm writing this letter to arrive at exactly the moment you need it most. To tell you you made the right choice. The brave choice. And I'm proud of you. More than proud, I'm in awe. By midnight, the clock will be destroyed in both our times. The temporal connection will end. We won't be able to write to each other anymore. This is goodbye, but Beatrice, it's not sad. It's right. We had our time together, impossible as it was. We loved across a century. We changed each other. That's more than most people get in a lifetime of conventional connection. Live, my love. Live fully. Find someone in your own time who deserves you, or don't, if solitude suits you better. But whatever you choose, know that you're capable of profound love. You're capable of burning. You've proved it. And when you die, whenever that is, however many years you have left, I believe we'll meet again. Not in time, but beyond it, in whatever comes after, where causality doesn't apply and love is all that matters. Wait for me there, Beatrice. I'll find you. The Clockmaker's promise. Yours eternally, Jonathan P.S. The photograph Margaret will give you is real. It's from the timeline that didn't happen but existed anyway. Quantum superposition, perhaps. You and I together, smiling despite knowing we'd have to part. Keep it, remember me, remember us. Remember that impossible love is still love, and love is never wasted. Margaret pulled another item from her bag, a photograph, aged and fragile. It showed Jonathan, young and handsome, standing beside a woman in a blue dress. The woman was Beatrice. Impossible, but undeniable. How? Beatrice couldn't finish the question. I don't know, Margaret admitted. Time travel, quantum mechanics, something beyond physics. Does it matter? You loved each other. That's what matters. Outside, impatient knocking. Whitmore's voice. "Mrs. Chen?" "We really need to proceed." Margaret squeezed Beatrice's hand. "He wanted you to know. You gave him a good life. Because of you, 3 generations of our family exist. My grandmother, my mother, me, my children, my grandchildren. We all owe our existence to your sacrifice. Thank you." She left, taking with her the envelope, leaving only the photograph and Jonathan's final letter. Beatrice sat alone in the workshop, holding the photograph, reading Jonathan's words over and over. At 11:47, 4 hours from now, the clock would be destroyed. The connection would end. She and Jonathan would never communicate again, but he would live. And she had proof, held it in her hands, that their love was real. The door opened again. Dr. Chen this time, with Whitmore behind her. "Dr. Holloway, it's time to go." Beatrice stood, tucked the photograph and letter carefully into her bag. "I'm ready." "We're going to take you to the hospital," Dr. Chen said gently. "Just for evaluation. We want to help you, Beatrice." "I know." Beatrice looked around the workshop one last time. At the clock that would soon be destroyed in 1906, preventing the catastrophe she and Jonathan had almost caused. At the tools, the benches, the space where she'd learned to love again. "I know you do. And I'll go with you." "I'll accept whatever help you think I need." "The delusions," Whitmore began, "weren't delusions." Beatrice turned to face him, and something in her expression made him step back. "But I don't expect you to believe that." "I don't need you to believe it. I know what happened here. I know what I felt, what I learned, what I chose. That's enough." She walked out of the workshop with her head high, holding Jonathan's final letter against her heart. Behind her, the clock stood silent, waiting for 11:47 p.m. when, a century apart, Jonathan would destroy it, and Beatrice would feel the connection break. 4 more hours. 4 hours to say goodbye to the impossible love that had changed everything. They kept Beatrice in the hospital overnight for observation. Dr. Chen was kind but firm. Psychiatric evaluation in the morning, possible medication, therapy referrals. Standard procedure for someone experiencing what they termed a grief-induced psychotic break. Beatrice didn't argue. She sat in her sterile room, watching the clock on the wall, counting down to 11:47 p.m. In 2 hours, Jonathan would destroy the clock. The temporal bridge would collapse. Whatever impossibility had connected them would end. She should have felt relief. They'd made the right choice, the moral choice. The world would keep moving, and no one would suffer Eleanor's fate. It was victory in its way, so why did it feel like dying? At 10:30, Beatrice did something reckless. She walked out. Simply stood up, dressed in her own clothes, and walked through the ward as if she had every right to be leaving. The night staff, undermanned and overwhelmed, barely noticed. She was out the door before anyone could stop her. She had to be in the workshop at 11:47. Had to be there when the connection broke. Even if she couldn't change anything, even if saying goodbye was all she could do, she had to be there. The taxi ride to Clerkenwell felt eternal. Beatrice watched the city slide past. London on a Tuesday night, alive and oblivious. People in pubs, couples walking hand in hand, the bright screens and traffic and pulse of ordinary life. All of it would have stopped, frozen in eternal moment if she and Jonathan had chosen differently. They'd saved this. All of this mundane, beautiful existence. The thought should have comforted her. It didn't. She reached the workshop at 11:38. 9 minutes. The door was locked. Whitmore had taken her key, but the lock was old and Beatrice was desperate. A bobby pin from her hair, some fumbling, and the mechanism gave way. The workshop welcomed her back like an old friend. Everything exactly as she'd left it hours ago. The clock stood silent in the centre, waiting for its destruction a century in the past. Beatrice approached it slowly, reverently. placed her hand on the cool bronze. "Jonathan," she whispered. "I'm here. I don't know if you can hear me, if the connection still exists even this much. But I'm here. And I'm sorry. And I love you. And I'm so proud of what we chose, even though it's killing me." 11:43. The air in the workshop began to change, thickening, taking on that amber quality Beatrice remembered from her first visit. The light shifted, not brighter or darker, but different, as if multiple sources were illuminating the space simultaneously. 44. Through the windows, London began to flicker. Modern buildings overlaid with Victorian structures. Cars and carriages occupying the same streets. Past and present bleeding together. Beatrice's heart hammered. This wasn't supposed to happen. Jonathan was destroying the clock, not activating it. Unless destruction and activation looked the same from the inside. Unless breaking the temporal bridge created one final, unstable moment of connection before everything collapsed. 45. The workshop was transforming around her. Objects flickering between states, new and aged, present and absent. And there, standing by the workbench in his shirt sleeves and leather vest, was a figure, translucent at first like a projection, then solidifying. Jonathan. He looked exactly as he did in the photograph. Dark hair, intense eyes, 34 years old and heartbreakingly alive. He was staring at the clock with his hand on it, mirroring Beatrice's own posture exactly. Then he turned and saw her. The moment stretched. His expression moved through shock, wonder, joy, grief, all in the space of a heartbeat. His lips formed her name, though she couldn't hear him across the temporal gap. But Beatrice could read the word on his lips. Beatrice. Forks. The space between them was collapsing. Not just visual overlay now, actual convergence. Beatrice felt reality bending, stretching, trying to accommodate two different times in the same physical space. The air screamed with the strain. Jonathan moved toward her, and impossibly he was becoming more solid, more present. The workshop around them was stabilizing into something neither quite 1906 nor 2006, but a liminal space between. "You weren't supposed to come," she said, and realized she could hear her own voice, which meant he could too. "Neither were you." His voice was rough, choked. "You said you couldn't. You said, I know what I said." Beatrice was crying. "But I had to be here. Had to see you one more time, even if just to say goodbye properly. Beatrice." He was close now, close enough to touch. "We don't have much time. The clock. I started destroying it at 11:47 in my time. But the mechanism is fighting back, creating one last convergence. One last moment before it breaks completely. How long? Minutes. Maybe less. Reality is already fracturing." He gestured to the windows, where London was caught in impossible superposition. Every era existing simultaneously, people moving through streets that shifted around them. "When the clock finally dies, this space will collapse. We'll separate. It'll be like this never happened." 47. The clock began to chime, deep, resonant notes that shouldn't have been possible from a mechanism being destroyed. But somehow it was both shattering and singing, dying and giving birth to this one final moment. "Then we have minutes," Beatrice said. "We have now." She crossed the space between them, and Jonathan met her halfway. When they touched, when his hands cupped her face and her fingers gripped his vest, the sensation was overwhelming. He was warm, solid, utterly real. The ghost made flesh, the impossible made present. "You're beautiful," Jonathan whispered, his thumbs wiping away her tears. "More beautiful than I imagined. More real." "You're young," Beatrice said, half laughing, half sobbing. "God, you're so young. I'm old enough to be—" "You're perfect." He pulled her close, and Beatrice melted into him, feeling the solid warmth of his chest, the beat of his heart, the rise and fall of his breathing. "You're everything." They stood there, holding each other while the world fractured around them. Through the windows, Beatrice could see time itself breaking down. People frozen mid-step, others moving at impossible speeds. The clock's final convergence was creating exactly what they'd feared, a spreading zone where causality stopped making sense. "It's happening," she whispered against his chest. "What we were afraid of. We're freezing time." "I know." Jonathan's arms tightened around her. "I can feel it spreading. Every second we stay like this, the effect grows. Soon it'll reach beyond the workshop, beyond the street, beyond London. Eventually everyone experiences what Eleanor did." Beatrice pulled back to look at him. "We have to stop this. We have to end it now while we still can." "I know." His expression was anguished. "But Beatrice, I just found you. I just got to hold you."
"How do I let you go?"
"The same way I let you go hours ago." She reached up to touch his face, memorizing every line, every shadow. With love. With courage. With the knowledge that this moment, brief as it is, was worth everything. Around them the workshop groaned. Objects were starting to duplicate. One version from 1906, one from 2006, both occupying the same space in defiance of physics. The air itself seemed to be tearing. "Tell me how," Jonathan said desperately. "Tell me how to let you go when holding you is the only thing I've wanted for months." "You already know." Beatrice pressed her forehead to his. "Because you've done it before. With Eleanor. You let her go when holding on would have been crueler. This is the same. If we hold on now, we doom everyone to the same fate she suffered. And you've carried that guilt for a year. I won't make you carry it forever." "I don't care." His voice broke. "Beatrice, I don't care about the world, about causality, about any of it. I just care about you." "I know." She was crying freely now, not bothering to wipe away the tears. "I know because I feel the same way. But love isn't just feeling, Jonathan. It's choosing. And we have to choose right, even when right feels impossible." Through the window she could see the freeze effect spreading. Buildings caught mid-collapse, birds suspended in flight. A woman frozen with her mouth open in a scream she'd been screaming for what might be subjective centuries already. They were running out of time. "Running out of chances to fix this. The clock," Beatrice said urgently. "How do we destroy it? Properly, completely, in a way that ends this? We have to break it together." Jonathan pulled back, his hands sliding down to grip hers. From both times simultaneously. The convergence only exists because we're both touching the mechanism. If we break the physical connection, pull the heart out of the clock while we're both in contact with it, the temporal bridge should collapse, violently. What happens to us? I don't know. Best case, we're thrown back to our respective times. Worst case, he didn't finish. Worst case, we're caught in the collapse. Beatrice understood. Trapped in the space between times forever, or erased entirely. Quantum casualties. Yes. Jonathan squeezed her hands. "Beatrice, if there's any chance you survive and I don't, live well. Live fully. Find someone who deserves you. Don't spend the rest of your life mourning a man you barely knew. We knew each other." Beatrice's voice was fierce. "We knew each other better than most people who spend decades together. Don't minimize that. Don't act like our weeks of letters were nothing. They were everything." He pulled her close again, one last embrace. "But they're also over, and we both have to accept that. Together," Beatrice asked. "Together." Jonathan positioned them on opposite sides of the clock, their hands on the central mechanism, the crystalline chamber that pulsed with unstable energy. "On three. We pull the chamber out simultaneously. The temporal bridge collapses, the effect reverses, and we say goodbye." Beatrice's voice was steady now, resolved. "I'm ready, Jonathan." "I'm not." He looked at her across the glowing mechanism, his eyes bright with tears and love and terrible certainty. "I'll never be ready to lose you, Beatrice. But I'm willing to do it anyway, because you taught me that's what love means." "One," Beatrice said. The workshop around them was barely holding together now. Victorian tools and modern equipment occupying the same space, flickering between states. The ceiling showed both old wooden beams and modern wiring. Time itself was schizophrenic, too, Jonathan continued. Through the windows, London was caught in temporal superposition so severe it was painful to look at. Every era stacked on every other, Roman ruins and medieval churches and Victorian buildings and modern skyscrapers all coexisting, all real, all impossible. Beatrice... Jonathan's voice was urgent. Before we do this, before we end everything, I need to tell you, these weeks with you have been the best of my life. Better than anything with Eleanor. Better than anything I'll have in whatever future awaits me. You showed me what love could be when it's freely given instead of desperately clutched. Thank you for that gift. Thank you for teaching me I could still burn, Beatrice replied. Thank you for making me feel alive one last time. Not the last time. Jonathan's smile was sad and hopeful simultaneously. Somewhere beyond time, beyond death, we'll meet again. I promise you that. The clockmaker's promise. I'll hold you to it. Beatrice gripped the mechanism tighter, feeling its energy thrumming through her. I'll wait for you, Jonathan. However long it takes. 3. They pulled. The world exploded, not physically. There was no fire, no violence. But reality itself came apart at the seams. The temporal bridge didn't just collapse. It unwound, unravelled, reversed. Beatrice felt herself being torn away from Jonathan, felt the centuries reasserting themselves between them with brutal force. The last thing she saw was his face, anguished and loving, mouthing words she couldn't hear but understood perfectly. I love you. Then she was falling through time itself. Past and future and present all streaming past her like a river in flood. She saw moments from her own life flashing backward. The hospital, the workshop, Richard's death, their wedding, her childhood. But mixed in were moments that weren't hers, Jonathan's life unreeling beside her own. His death in 1953, old and surrounded by family. His children growing up. His marriage to Catherine. Days and years of life he would live because they'd made the right choice, and one moment that shone brighter than all the rest, Jonathan in his workshop in 1906, 3 days after their encounter, sitting at his bench and writing. Not to her, the temporal bridge was broken. But in his personal journal, words meant only for himself. She was real. She came. For 3 minutes we existed in the same space, and it was everything I imagined and more. Then we destroyed the mechanism together and she was gone. The clock is in pieces. I'll never rebuild it. Never attempt temporal manipulation again. But I'm alive and she taught me why life matters. She taught me to let go with grace. Tomorrow I'm going to start living the way she lived. Fully, bravely, without trying to imprison time. I'll marry eventually. I'll have children. I'll grow old. And every day I'll carry Beatrice with me, not as regret but as inspiration. Thank you, my angel from the future. Thank you for loving me enough to let me go. The vision faded. Beatrice was still falling, but the sensation was changing. Instead of being torn apart, she felt herself being carefully placed, lowered gently back into her own time. She hit ground, metaphorically, though it felt physical, and opened her eyes. The workshop. 2006. The clock lay in pieces around her, bronze scattered like bones, crystal shattered to powder. No trace of the temporal mechanism remained. On the wall the clock read 11:51 p.m. 4 minutes had passed. 4 minutes that had contained an eternity. Beatrice was alone. She sat on the floor among the ruins, holding herself, shaking. The grief was overwhelming, a physical thing crushing her chest. He was gone. Really, truly gone. No more letters, no more connection. Just memory and a photograph, and the certain knowledge that in 1906, Jonathan was doing the same thing, sitting among the ruins of his clock, mourning the impossible love that had changed everything, but he would live. That's what mattered. He would have a good life. and so would she. Eventually, Beatrice stood. Her legs were shaky, her head spinning, but she was whole, alive. The workshop was real, solid, firmly in 2006. No flickering, no convergence. Time had resumed its normal flow. She picked up pieces of the clock, examining them. The mechanism truly was destroyed, not just disassembled, but fundamentally broken. Some pieces looked melted, as if they'd been subjected to impossible heat. Others were cracked through, structural integrity compromised beyond repair. There would be no rebuilding this. No second attempt at temporal bridge. It was over. Beatrice found her bag, still sitting where she'd left it. Inside, the photograph Margaret had given her. She pulled it out, looked at it in the workshop's dim light. She and Jonathan smiling despite everything. Proof that the impossible had been briefly possible. On impulse, she turned the photograph over. On the back, in Jonathan's handwriting, the Guardian and the Clockmaker. March 23rd, 1906. March 23rd, 2006. She taught me everything. Below that, in different ink, added later, she realised. More words. I lived to be 81 because of her. Had 3 children, 7 grandchildren. Died happy. If you're reading this, whoever you are, know that love transcends time. I'm proof. Beatrice pressed the photograph to her chest and wept. Not just from sorrow, but from overwhelming relief and pride and bittersweet joy. He'd lived. He'd lived well. And he'd never forgotten her. That would have to be enough. They found Beatrice in the workshop at dawn, sitting among the ruins of the clock. Dr. Chen and Whitmore arrived together, prepared for the worst. Instead, they found her calm, composed, and disturbingly sane. I'm ready to go, Beatrice said before they could speak. I know how this looks. I know you think I had a psychotic break, and I can't prove otherwise, so I'll cooperate. Evaluation, therapy, whatever you think I need. But on one condition, I keep the photograph. Dr. Chen looked at the image Beatrice held, an old photograph of a man and woman standing together. Who are they? Jonathan Hale and someone who loved him, Beatrice replied. That's all you need to know. They took her back to the hospital. Ran tests, conducted interviews, assessed her mental state, and discovered, to everyone's surprise, that Beatrice Holloway was perfectly lucid. Depressed, grieving, exhausted, but not delusional. She spoke clearly about what had happened, acknowledging it sounded impossible but refusing to recant. I'm not asking you to believe me, she told the psychiatric panel. I'm simply telling you what I experienced. Whether it was real or elaborate hallucination driven by grief, I'll probably never know for certain. But it felt real. And it changed me. That's enough. They released her after 3 days with diagnoses of complicated grief and possible dissociative episode, but no requirement for involuntary treatment. Beatrice accepted prescriptions she didn't plan to take, and therapy referrals she might actually use. Then she went home to her empty flat and slept for 16 hours straight. When she woke, the world felt different. Lighter. The grief for Richard was still there, but no longer crushing. And woven through it was something new. Gratitude. For Jonathan, yes, but also for herself. For discovering she was capable of burning, of loving with devastating intensity. That knowledge changed everything. She'd thought she was too old, too settled, too invisible to feel passion. Jonathan had proved her magnificently wrong. Over the following weeks, Beatrice slowly rebuilt her life. She returned to teaching, but requested different courses, ones about love letters and personal correspondence through history. She started a research project on the intersection of emotion and technology, examining how people maintained connection across impossible distances. She didn't tell anyone it was really about her and Jonathan, but they'd understand eventually when she published. The university, somewhat sheepishly, allowed her to keep the workshop. The destroyed clock was deemed historical accident and written off. Beatrice paid to have the space cleaned and secured, but she didn't try to restore it. Instead, She left it as it was, a memorial to impossible love and necessary sacrifice. She visited sometimes, sitting in the quiet, reading Jonathan's letters, which still existed in her memory even if the physical copies had vanished. Speaking to him across the void, knowing he couldn't hear but needing to say the words anyway. "I'm okay," she told the empty air during one such visit. "It still hurts. But it's a good hurt, the kind that reminds me I'm alive. Thank you for that, Jonathan. Thank you for everything." 3 months after the clock's destruction, a package arrived at Beatrice's flat. No return address, but postmarked from California. Inside, a leather-bound journal and a note from Margaret Chen. Dr. Holloway. "My grandmother passed away last month at the age of 102. While sorting her effects, we found this journal. It was kept by my great-grandfather, Jonathan Hale, from 1906 until his death in 1953. He left instructions that it should be given to you, if you could be found. I think you'll understand why when you read it. With warm regards," Margaret Beatrice opened the journal with shaking hands. The first entry was dated March 24th, 1906. She was real, she came. And now she's gone. And I'm alive in ways I wasn't sure I could be again after Eleanor. She read the entire journal in one sitting, tears streaming down her face. 47 years of Jonathan's life, documented in his careful handwriting. His gradual healing from Eleanor's death. His courtship of Catherine, kind, patient Catherine, who asked for nothing but companionship and got a man learning how to love without desperation. The birth of his children, his continued work in horology, but with new philosophy. Clocks should mark time, not try to control it, and scattered throughout. Entries addressed to Beatrice. 10. Your influence. Even though you're a century ahead and will never speak again, I find myself asking, what would Beatrice do? When faced with difficult choices, she would choose bravely, I think. She would choose love over fear. 25. I'm 53 today. Beatrice would be, 66 if she was 47 in 2006? Still alive, I hope. Still teaching. Still burning quietly in ways the world probably doesn't appreciate. I hope she's happy. I hope she found someone worthy of her. I hope she knows I think of her daily. 40. The world is at war. Everything I believed about progress and civilization lies in ruins. But I remember what Beatrice said about time being resilient, about humanity surviving. She was warning me, I realise now. She knew what was coming. And she was right, we survive. We always survive. 953, March 22nd. Tomorrow is March 23rd. 47 years since we met for those impossible 3 minutes. I'm 81 years old and dying. The doctors say days, maybe a week. I'm not afraid. I've had a good life, a full life, a life made possible by Beatrice's sacrifice. If souls exist, if there's anything beyond death, I believe I'll find her there. We'll have the time we couldn't have in life. The clockmaker and the guardian, finally free from temporal constraints. Wait for me, Beatrice. I'm coming. The journal ended there. Beatrice sat with it for hours, reading and rereading Jonathan's words. He'd thought of her. For 47 years, through marriage and children and the entirety of his long life, he'd carried her with him. She wasn't forgotten. She wasn't just a moment of madness or grief-induced hallucination. She was real, and their love was real, and it had mattered. That changed everything. Beatrice began researching Jonathan's later life more thoroughly. She visited archives, interviewed his descendants, pieced together the full story of the man who'd vanished and reappeared, changed. What she discovered was remarkable. After March 1906, Jonathan Hale had become a different kind of inventor. He still made clocks, but they were celebrations of time rather than attempts to control it. Each piece was unique, beautiful, meant to help people treasure moments rather than try to capture them. He'd also written extensively about philosophy and time. Essays that were considered ahead of their time, discussing concepts that wouldn't be formalized until decades later. Relativity, quantum mechanics, the observer effect. As if he'd had a teacher from the future who'd explained these things to him. Beatrice smiled reading these papers. She'd explained them. In their letters, she'd shared everything about her time's understanding of physics. And Jonathan had absorbed it, used it, built on it. Her influence had rippled through his life in ways she'd never anticipated. She found evidence of his family too. Catherine, who'd been a schoolteacher and suffragette, quietly radical in ways the Edwardian era allowed. Their 3 children, Eleanor, named for his lost first love, Beatrice, named for his found true love, and Thomas. All had lived full lives, had children of their own, carried forward Jonathan's legacy of treasuring time. Margaret Chen had been his great-granddaughter through Beatrice, the daughter. The journal had been passed down specifically through that, a line with instructions that it go to the woman from the future if she exists. Jonathan had believed, even after the clock was destroyed, even after decades of ordinary life, he'd believed their connection was real, and he'd made sure she would know he never forgot. 6 months after destroying the clock, Beatrice made a decision. She resigned from the university, used Richard's life insurance and her savings to do something she'd never done before, something purely for herself. She opened a shop in Clerkenwell, not far from where Jonathan's original workshop had stood. A clock restoration business. She hired a young horologist named Sarah, who had a gift for understanding old mechanisms and a patience with Beatrice's particular quirks about how to treat timepieces. The shop's philosophy was simple. Clocks should be preserved, restored, honoured, but never asked to do more than mark time. They didn't try to stop moments or speed them up. They simply measured what passed, bearing witness to life as it unfolded. Beatrice called it the Clockmaker's Promise. The sign above the door showed an illustration of gears and roses intertwined. People brought her their broken inheritance pieces, their grandfather's pocket watches, their grandmother's mantel clocks. And Beatrice would research each one, tell its story, give it context. Then Sarah would restore it, bring it back to gentle ticking life. They never built new clocks, only preserved old ones, only honoured what had been. The shop became Beatrice's sanctuary, her second workshop. She spent her days surrounded by the gentle symphony of ticking, each clock marking time in its own rhythm. It was peaceful, purposeful, a life rebuilt from the ruins of impossible love. She made friends, other women her age mostly, who'd also rebuilt themselves after loss. They went to theatre, took walking tours, drank wine and laughed about the absurdities of aging in a youth-obsessed world. Beatrice was happy, genuinely, surprisingly happy. She thought of Jonathan often, but without the sharp pain of those first months. Now it was a gentle ache, like an old wound that only hurt when the weather changed. She wondered sometimes if he'd been right, if they would meet again in whatever came after. She hoped so, but she didn't live for that hope. She lived for the present, for the moment she was in, because that's what Jonathan had taught her. Time was a gift. Wasting it on grief for what was gone dishonoured both the giver and the gift. Years passed. Beatrice aged gracefully, her hair fully silver now, her face lined but serene. She published her book on Jonathan Hale, a scholarly biography that hinted at mysteries without revealing them. It did modestly well in academic circles. She never married again. Had a few brief relationships, pleasant but ultimately unsatisfying. After Jonathan, after burning, that intensely comfortable companionship felt like settling. So she chose solitude instead and found it suited her. At 62, on a Tuesday in March, Beatrice was walking through Clerkenwell when she felt it. A strange sensation, like the air pressing close. a thickness in the atmosphere she hadn't felt since that night at the clock 12 years ago. She stopped, her heart suddenly racing. Looked around. The street appeared normal. Tourists and locals, shops and cafes. But there, at the corner where Jonathan's workshop had stood before being demolished 10 years prior, the light seemed different. Thicker. Amber-coloured, like light through old glass. Beatrice walked toward it without deciding to. Her feet simply moved. As she approached the corner, the world around her began to flicker. Not violently, not obviously enough for others to notice. But she saw it. Layers of time, translucent and overlapping. Horse-drawn carriages ghosting through the space occupied by modern cars, Victorian buildings superimposed over contemporary architecture. And there, standing on the exact spot where his workshop door had been, looking at her with absolute recognition, an impossible presence, Jonathan. But not young Jonathan from that night 12 years ago. This was an older man, still recognisable but aged. Perhaps 60, perhaps older. His dark hair was grey, his face lined, his body carrying the weight of years. But his eyes were the same. Intense, loving, certain. "Beatrice," he said, and his voice was warm wind, golden light coming home. "You're dead," she whispered. "You died in 1953. It's 2018. You've been dead for 65 years. "I know." He smiled, and it was the most beautiful thing she'd ever seen. But love, it turns out, really is stronger than death, stronger than time. It creates resonances, echoes. On anniversaries, in places soaked with memory, sometimes those echoes become strong enough to cross over, just for moments, just for brief visits. How long do we have?" Beatrice asked, because she'd learned to ask that question first. Minutes, probably. Maybe less. Jonathan stepped closer, and she noticed he wasn't quite solid. More present than the ghostly overlays of Victorian London, but not entirely corporeal either. "But I had to see you. I had to tell you, you were right. About everything. Letting go was the hardest thing I've ever done, but it was the only thing that let me truly live. I had a good life, Beatrice. Children, grandchildren. Work I was proud of. And every day I carried you with me. You made every moment more precious because you taught me they were finite. I know." Beatrice smiled through tears. "I read your journal." Margaret gave it to me. "I know you lived well." "I'm so proud of that. So grateful." "I've been watching when I could," Jonathan admitted. "Very romantic of me, very stalkerish. But in whatever space exists after death, it's not what any religion got quite right, but it's real. I could sometimes see through to your time. I've watched you build your life. The shop, the friendships, the books. You're magnificent, Beatrice. You were always magnificent, but watching you bloom after our impossible love, it's been the greatest joy of my existence beyond existence." "You're still 34 in my memory," Beatrice said, half laughing, half crying. "It's disconcerting to see you aged." "I wanted you to see me as I was at the end," Jonathan explained. "To know that I lived fully, that I aged gracefully, that I died satisfied. I didn't want you carrying guilt about cutting my life short. You gave me life, Beatrice. Long, full life." The world flickered more intensely. The resonance was weakening. "When you die," Jonathan said quietly, "I'll be waiting. I don't know exactly how the afterlife works. It's more complicated and simpler than anything I imagined. But I know this. We're connected. Entangled, like those quantum particles you told me about. We'll find each other again. And next time we'll have more than minutes. We'll have eternity. Promise?" Beatrice asked, her voice breaking. "The clockmaker's promise." Jonathan raised his hand and Beatrice raised hers. They pressed palms together, and even though his hand was only semi-solid, she felt the warmth of him, the reality of him. The certainty that what they'd had was real and lasting. I'll wait for you, Beatrice. However long it takes. And when you cross over, I'll be there. First face you see. First voice you hear. How much longer do I have? She couldn't help asking. Years yet. Good years. You'll publish more books, mentor students, help Sarah take over the shop completely. You'll travel. You'll have small adventures. You'll age beautifully and die peacefully in your sleep at 78. He smiled. I've seen it. And Beatrice, you'll be happy. Really, truly happy. The world flickered more violently. The amber light was fading. I have to go, Jonathan said. The resonance is collapsing. But Beatrice, thank you. For that night. For teaching me to live. For letting me love you across every impossible distance. These minutes, seeing you aged and happy and whole, they're a gift beyond measure. Thank you, Beatrice whispered. For teaching me I could burn. For showing me I wasn't done feeling deeply. For giving me back myself. He was fading, becoming translucent, but his smile remained radiant and certain. See you soon, my love. In whatever comes next. In the place where time has no power and love is all that exists. Soon, Beatrice agreed. I'll wait. Don't wait too eagerly. His voice was fading too, but she could still hear the affection in it. Live first. Live fully. I'll still be here when you're ready. And then he was gone. And it was just Clerkenwell on a Tuesday afternoon, and Beatrice standing on a corner crying while confused tourists gave her wide berth. But she wasn't sad. She was complete. For the first time since that night 12 years ago, she felt the story had properly ended. Or not ended, transformed. Moved into its next phase. Jonathan had lived well. And so would she. And when her time came, he'd be waiting. That was enough. More than enough. It was everything. Beatrice lived exactly as Jonathan predicted. She published 2 more books, mentored a generation of young historians, travelled to Italy and Greece and places she'd always wanted to see. She helped Sarah take full ownership of the shop, staying on as consultant and occasional visitor. She made peace with Richard's memory, understanding finally that loving Jonathan didn't diminish what she'd had with her husband. They'd been different kinds of love, one comfortable, one consuming, and both had shaped her. Both had mattered. At 75, she gave a lecture at Oxford about love letters through history. The auditorium was packed with students and colleagues, all hanging on her words as she discussed how people maintained connection across impossible distances. Love, Beatrice told them, is not about proximity. It's not about time together or physical presence. Love is about seeing and being seen. About choosing someone again and again, even when, especially when, choosing them is difficult. About treasuring moments without trying to imprison them. She showed slides of historical correspondences, Jane Austen's letters, Abelard and Heloise, the love letters of ordinary soldiers and their wives during wartime, each one a testament to connection maintained despite separation. She didn't mention her own letters. Didn't reference the impossible correspondence that had changed her life. But astute students noticed the passion in her voice when she spoke about written words bridging unbridgeable gaps, and they wondered what story lay behind the academic analysis. After the lecture, a young woman approached. Dr. Holloway, that was beautiful. But I have to ask, it sounded personal. Like you were speaking from experience, not just research. Beatrice smiled. The best research always is personal. We study what matters to us. What changes us? Did someone write you letters like that? Someone separated from you? Yes, Beatrice admitted. Someone I loved very much, whom I couldn't be with. But whose words changed everything about how I understood love and time and what matters. Are they still alive? No, but somehow that doesn't diminish what we had. Love doesn't end with death. It transforms, continues, echoes through all the years that follow. She looked at the young woman, so earnest, so hungry for that kind of connection. Don't settle for comfortable when you can have transformative. Don't accept adequate when you can burn. Life's too short for anything less. The young woman nodded, tears in her eyes. Thank you, Dr. Holloway. Thank you for listening. Beatrice gathered her notes. Now go, live, love recklessly. Make mistakes. Feel deeply. That's what time is for. She died at 78, exactly as Jonathan had predicted. Peacefully, in her sleep, in her Bloomsbury flat. The music box Jonathan had made, the one Margaret had given her years ago, sat on her bedside table still playing its gentle melody. On her face, those who found her remarked later, was the most beautiful smile, as if she'd seen something wonderful just before letting go, as if someone she'd been waiting for had finally arrived.